Hey, beautiful people. Welcome to the Intersection and ONA podcast. Uh, your host here, Reverend Derek, Director of Programming for the Open and Affirming Coalition. And I am here with the awesome Rachael Ward. Yay!
Yay!
Studio
Thank you so much.
audience. Yeah. So good to see you again.
Good to see you too. It's been a minute.
It has. Thank you so much for doing this. It was so awesome to get to meet you in person in real life at Synod and spend some time together and see how you move and work. And it was just awesome. So that was cool.
It was fun. It was a fun time.
It was. It was. Can you please give us the elevator speech introduction of who you are and what you do, your job title? Because I always forget and I always mess it up. So I'm like, you know it.
I do know it. What's so funny about church and titles is that they're often very long. And because as church people, we want to love everybody well and we want to include all the aspects of what we do, right? So we make titles very, very long. So I've been working on this in the last month to kind of figure out how do you condense a really large, what we call at the United Church of Christ National Setting, portfolio into an elevator pitch. So I first will start with myself because I am human first, and that's important to
Absolutely.
me. Before anything else or title that I hold, I am a human who considers myself to be incredibly passionate about being a pastor, about being a scholar, a queer theologian, and an activist. And all of those things intermingle with each other, are very fluid and interchange and play with each other every single day of every single moment. I really, really, really thrive in liminal space, in gray areas where there is infinite possibility, and bringing that infinite possibility to the wider church and honestly to the world that we play in, that we go into.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of like my elevator pitch. And it's very Trinitarian, which I am very Trinitarian. And I'm very much a theological nerd. So you probably will hear Bible things from me, but like cute, fun, queer Bible things from me today. But yeah, I seek pleasure and joy, and I try to slow down and encourage those around me to slow down too in this work that's very hard and very draining. And that work is, see, there you go.
I love it.
I make my own sound effects here. I am the team lead and minister of gender and sexuality justice ministries for the UCC. And I also, wildly enough, have more. I also am the executive director of our HIV and AIDS network. So when you think about work or resources or care or, a void or a need that you are seeing or dreaming about within the framework of the United Church of Christ, I am the person that you can come to and have those conversations with from the national setting. So anything to do with gender, sexuality, and the aspects of injustices or justice initiatives that you're looking to start, or just plain old need to have a wider awareness of what's going on in the world, it's me and a wonderful team of people who work alongside me, and a wonderful group of people who work at the national setting too. Because I'm sure, as you've talked about on this podcast from ONA, that this work is intersectional. You can't talk about
Absolutely.
gender and sexuality without talking about race and class and immigration and refugee, and like all of these components go and run together. So that's my title. It's very long, but the elevator pitch of it is, if anything is going on in your world with gender and sexuality and you're looking for resources, care, or building things, come talk to me. We're here as a team, and we're here as the national setting to work with you. And as I say, touch the ground together and build. So
That's
that's
so
me.
beautiful. It's so beautiful, and it's so important because I came from a denomination, and no denomination shaming or anything, but I came from a denomination that that really just focused on this one aspect of what church should look like. And it was almost like you keep so many human parts of yourself outside of the church to come, and it was just literally just talk about Jesus. And Jesus is awesome, but Jesus did other stuff. And so just for the UCC to have these offices in place where churches and ministries and conferences and groups can come to for support, for help, for guidance, for encouragement, just or sometimes just to flesh things out, just to have a sounding board. It just reminds me of why I love the UCC so much. So
we love you too.
Let me see, we're loved. So just a couple things we want people to get to know how awesome you are. I fell in love with Rachael the first time we were on a Zoom meeting together, and I was like, oh, I just love this energy, right? And so how would you describe your story or your faith journey? Like, how did you get to where you are now? I know, right?
If you're queer and you're listening or watching this podcast, you might be laughing too.
Absolutely. I laugh every time I ask.
I am so amazed at the impeccable, unpredictable, mystic, cosmic nature of how God provides, guides, and resources us in the deepest darkness of our sorrow and in the deepest stored place of like our knowing and our becoming. I have no idea how I am where I am right now. And honestly, I don't need to know. And that is a component of where I am in my faith journey, in my spiritual journey, and in my always practicing freedom and embodiment journey. And that has not always been true for me. I was raised in a very small southern town in the bottom of the state of Georgia. And I like to tell people the context of that to help them understand how small. When we got a Walmart when I was a junior in high school, the whole town shut down and we had a ribbon cutting ceremony. So like that's how small. And it was one of those like true like there's a square and you have your four like main denomination folks, and your Southern Baptist Church was the largest one. And I am a very much been a lot of places, seen a lot of things, experienced a lot of theology, participated in a lot of different versions of theology. I was in a PCUSA church until I was 12. Then I was in a Southern Baptist congregation until I left high school. I was nomadic in college, where obviously, the quintessential story of going to college and being like, oh, sexuality is a thing, and having to wrestle with, the indoctrination of a variance of whitewashed, infallible biblical theology about parent dynamics, obeying parents, obviously homophobia being abomination, all those things, and having a deep, 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 deep love for Jesus. There was something about, this Jesus dude that I met in my Southern Baptist Sunday school frame that left a super wide impression upon me. I was always there's a German Shepherd barking. My dog, Jack, might be talking during this podcast.
Hey, Jack.
He says, hey, back. I was very inquisitive. I always pushed back on things that I was told, but I also really, really would accept some of those things too, right? Like you're conditioned as a child, you're conditioned to really trust and believe those around you and those in authority in quotations. But I always really pushed on the idea of separation, segregation. You hang out with these people, you don't do these things. And and really feeling attention and the participation of what I was told to do versus what I thought I was hearing in these Bible stories that I was hearing in my Sunday school time. And I can remember foundationally that like the Good Samaritan story is like foundational biblical text for me. Foundational, and really, really resonates throughout, you know, all aspects of my personhood and has really journeyed with me. That's like the Jesus parable. That's the Jesus that I'm like, okay, there's something about this that's different, and I want to participate in this. So I was highly involved in ministry as much as one can be. And when my Southern Baptist congregation wouldn't let me do Bible study because at the time I identified and was, you know, saying I am a woman, she, her, these things, I went to the Methodist church and did it there. So
Wow.
my little undertones of subversion, queer subversion, were with me. And then you have the rupture point, right? Like a lot of us listening have everybody has a unique story to their rupture points. We all have different rupture moments. And we can experience them as very painful because they are, and we can also utilize them for change. It took your boy here like 10 plus years to utilize it for change because I had to walk through the valley. But the rupture point is, what do you do with, you've been told one thing, you're experiencing one thing,
Yes.
and the world is communicating another message. What's true? What's of value? So faith-wise, college dramatics, in my early 20s, kind of doing newspaper journalism. Here I am now. I have a long, vast journey. And in my late 20s is when I like returned back to going to church. And I returned back going to church to a Anglican congregation, which is not affirming, very not affirming
Right.
Anglican. No diss or shade to that. But God is in everything, Spirit is in everything, Jesus is in everything. Like all spaces hold all things. And was very nourished there in many ways, and to the point where I said, oh, I think I've always been involved in ministry. I really want to be involved in ministry. I'm going to go to seminary. And, you know, had your typical breakup story with your pastor in your church who's like,
Right.
love you, you're great, we can't do this with you, sob, sob, sob. And I went to seminary, angry, very angry, very, very, very angry.
Wow. Seminary is interesting if you're angry.
Everybody's angry. Everybody enters seminary angry. And if they try to tell you differently, I'm curious about it. Like there's some kind of current, even subconscious or conscious, of like anger, disappointment, rejection, uncertainty, value, like something is happening there on top of call and all those things. So I spent 4 years in a dual degree program, really committed to, why do I want to be there? Why I know this is a yes, but like, but what does that look like? What am I being invited into? And working out like a new relationship to that trauma, because it's trauma. And realizing more and more and more that I love being on the ground with other queer folks, and I love being on the ground with allies, and I love being on the ground with people who don't get it, because we need each other. And so at this point, you know, throughout seminary, I was hodgepodging different jobs, different situations, different movements, and trying to have a robust experience in organizing and activism and care. In 2020, I created this thing called Bible Query with a friend, and we did a cohort for 6 months. You should never do something for 6 months, but we did it for 6 months with 35 people from all over the world, teaching theology, sound theology, in mind, body, and spirit. And I just was so hungry in cultivating that. And then somehow God said, hey, this job is available. You should apply. And I laughed because like, what? And here we are. And I have the extreme honor and pleasure and joy of being able to critique, subvert, invite people in to collaborate, in their humanity and to care. And the faith journey is ongoing. I get angry. I still get angry. I get hurt. But I also realize that the why component I no longer really need to understand, because it will be what it will be, as God will be who God will be, and I will be taken care of because we're going to take care of each other. So that's my roller coaster roundabout way of giving you an answer.
No, that's so powerful, because anytime, like you said earlier, like anytime there are queer people who are occupying any space where we know there's a tradition of marginalizing and oppressing and trying to keep us out, it's so interesting how we find ways of figuring out who we are in the midst of that oppression. Someone yesterday, I was talking about Twitter, and they were like, "Oh, you're still on Twitter?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, why?" Because Elon Musk and this and that. And I have nothing against people who have decided to make the pool. And one day I may. I said, but I'm on here because this is where my people, my Black community, Black Twitter, is huge. It's literally like if somebody says something, I go there. And that's where I found out about Mike Brown first, Trayvon Martin, Orlando Castile. Before it became mainstream, we were talking about it on Twitter. And they were like, well, how are you navigating that? And I said, well, unfortunately, this is what Black people have always done, which is occupy spaces where people don't want us, and find ways to flourish and get what we need from it. So when I hear you talking about your story, and people will ask, well, how are you a gay Christian pastor, and how are you this, and how are you that? And it's like, I can't ever say, well, it was this day I woke up and said I'm just going to do it. It's like kind of what you just do.
Yeah.
Kind of figure it out.
Yeah. It's ongoing. It's ever present. Even if you try to ignore it or deny it or walk away from it or, take a break, it would still find you. It's a part of you. It's a component of your personhood. It's a piece of your personhood. It's a piece of your identity. Yeah.
Have you, not necessarily have you, but as you were reconciling, or what did that look like, reconciling your queerness with your Christianity? Because when you talk about being in a Southern Baptist church, you talk about that community. Was there a point where, or what did that point look like? Did you ever think, can I be queer? Can I be called to do this ministry? Is that something that can happen?
Yeah. So, I think I want to say a couple of things. I'm not actively reconciling those two things together at this present moment. I think that wrestling has been done. But I do think that there is always an active state of reconciling and renewing relationships that were either damaged, lost, or changed during that period of my life. I'm definitely in a season now where I really want to engage my parents differently. I really want to engage folks that I cut off for the sake of being told I needed to differently. And I really want to do some repair and forgiveness in an action state or form, because forgiveness has already been something I've done. That's something I'm currently in. And I need for my spirit. But as far as the reconciling journey, I don't think about how to say this. I had my own experiences of having more so what I experienced is God reaching out and speaking to me and saying, no, I love you, and I have a plan for you, which can freak you the hell out.
Absolutely.
And me saying cool, and then not really like touching any of that statement piece to me until I re-entered church and started having these like scenarios where queer people were like, oh, you're going to church, can I go with you? And then all of a sudden I had like a gaggle of queer people with me. And I'm like, what's happening? And I took what I thought was the appropriate step, which is, okay, well, I need to learn the biblical case, the affirming case,
Right.
affirming theology. And I did do that. And then as we grow, we can become more aware that sometimes we can't stop at the cognitive component, right? The brain,
Absolutely.
just sitting in the brain component. I started realizing in other queer Christian spaces and movements who were utilizing the case, and they're like, all right, go out, argue, do these things. And they were just getting broken and broken and broken and broken and broken. Because guess what? We cannot change people's hearts, minds, and spirits. We can only sow seeds, and we can only mirror our life experience, and we can only offer compassion and love and grace. And that is not everyone's call. And asking all queer people to do that is traumatizing and wrong.
Absolutely.
It's wrong. It's just not useful. It's not everybody's call. So for me, what took place was there's something else going on here. So when I went into seminary, and I was obviously, that's very cognitive, right? And using our brains is great. It's great. It's also highly westernized in thought. It's just to think our way through the situation. And we know that like our brain from psychology, there's like a felt sense, and then there's the like analyzing component. And for queer people, a lot of our felt sense is like very disembodied because we've either had to disassociate, we've dealt with all these things. So I spent my time in seminary like creating care models with narrative and figuring out like what does embodiment look like, what's happening in the body, what's happening in the spirit. We have these thoughts in our mind. Where do we find the harm, the grief, and the false narratives that don't belong to us, and kind of help rearrange that? That is what I believe is actually, it's not reconciling can you be queer and can you be a Christian. It is actually saying these things don't belong to me. I know what belongs to me. It was given to me at birth. That's why I have these pains and these gut feelings, and the way that you react emotionally is because if you believe like I believe, that we are born into the world marked by Creator with the Imago Dei within us, then we know that we're good. We know that we're wonderfully made. And the ways that we're reacting and the ways that we're using our brain to reconcile is what the world has conditioned us to do. But God gives us the blessing within us when we're born. Our name is not Jacob anymore, it is Israel. And that's true for every single person, not just a queer person. So it really is more of it's not even taking back. It's going inward and claiming and then wearing it outward again. There's no need to reconcile what already belongs to you. There is means to reconcile what's been done to you, but there's no means to reconcile who you are. You are who you are because you were made that way. So it's more of a embrace of what is useful and what belongs to you, and a release over time of what's not useful and what doesn't belong to you. And that's where I may differ from a lot of people who talk about this, but it's because I've done extensive research. My thesis work is on this. My work that I've done with the American Academy of Religion, and like I spent a lot of time in academia researching, okay, how are there ways to use embodiment and narrative care to kind of retool and reframe the way that we think about this? Because queer people start with, I'm wrong. There's something wrong with me. I have to reconcile if I'm good enough for God. And the reality is that that's totally backwards. You do not need anyone's permission to reconcile if you're good enough. You are. You were and you are and you will be. It's what's been conditioned in us that needs to get sussed out.
Absolutely. It's very Howard Thurman. Um, just that whole idea of like those places that you and God occupy within
Mm-hmm.
you, that
Mm-hmm.
too often we've let other people put stuff there. And it's like, no, God says I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, period. Like,
Mm-hmm.
not in spite of, or not because it's because I exist, then I am awesome in God's eyes. And so my work personally was believing that, because like you said, the things that other people had told me is like,
Mm-hmm.
this can't happen, but that didn't come from God, that came from other people. So
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
as we were talking, I got goosebumps, because it's like, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Howard Thurman is wonderful, um, and is a huge component of the way I move in the world. Um,
Absolutely. That's our book club discussion this month. We're looking at Jesus and the Disinherited, how it
I
can
saw.
speak to the queer, like how it speaks to us through a queer lens.
Mm-hmm.
So people are super excited, and we're doing the same thing with James Cone next month, just looking at different stuff. Um, Question: in our current social, political, anti-queer efforts in not just our country but our world, how do you think churches, or how do you think individuals, how do we respond? How do we show up? How do we minister? What I would love to hear your take, just especially now learning more about your theology and how your brain works. I'm like, ooh. But yeah, what do you think we do in in this current season?
Yeah, I want to say so many things to that. We are collectively in a chaotic moment in history that is in repeat of what we know to be true historically, um, which is why we're trying to erase history. And by we, I mean the nation and the laws that are getting attempted to be enacted and enacted.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are so many things from a church perspective. And it starts with you. Church is comprised of people, and people make the church. And if we are people of God, then church is everywhere. So I'm very excited and very grateful for the ways that people are asking the what can I do question, or what can be done question. Um, and I'm very excited about helping people dialogue to realize that the response is actually a lot more simple than we overcomplicate it. Um, the church has infinite resources, and you may all laugh at me when I say infinite resources, because we think about money, right?
Right.
When we talk about infinite resources, we talk about money. I, as a trans non-binary queer person, do not need your money. I need your heart, I need your spirit and your soul, and I need your body to be next to me. As a church who has resource, you have a building, you have the ability to host gay straight alliances, to host high school kids that can't be themselves in their schools. You have the ability to host incredible sex education curriculum that we have the privilege and honor of doing for 25 plus years now through our whole lives in partnership with the Unitarian Universalist. You have the ability to also individually as yourself become aware. There's so much going on, right? There's so much going on. There are books, there are webinars, um, there are groups of people with you who want to have these dialogues together. There is us to help you and come into the frame and walk with you. Um, And there is also the physical presence. For example, we're going to have one of the most painful, excruciating legislative sessions coming in 2024. It's an election year. Things are going to be absolutely brutal. And our churches, who have space near state capitals, can be a soft landing for folks who need the care. Policy, lobbyists, kids who are going to skip school to talk in, don't make this law, parents of queer kids, like that's a thing we know how to do. We know how to care. Absolutely. You don't have to understand a queer person's experience to show them the love of God, to be the light of Jesus. You don't need to understand. You just need to be aware that they need your love just like anyone else does. And so that's like a tangible, here's a tangible example. Right now, I think that I keep saying it because it's true. We're in a fertile soil season. There's a lot of things that we can plant and be able to continue to harvest. I don't believe Jubilee has to be a passage we read about and dream about. I think Jubilee can be every day. And the way that we bring that to life is by asking, what is the need? How can we meet the need? There's a need. And the need can be as simple as, my congregant down the street has a trans son, and I know this law has just been passed. Can we do a meal train? Can we invite them in? Can we create space? It's what we have been doing as the church since the church became the church, at a hodgepodge table of whatever we imagine in our brains, which was very intersectional in its approach. Taking it back to that simplicity is key, and understanding that ordinary people are activists, and that activist doesn't mean that you're in the street yelling and raging or whatever frame you have. It's ordinary people who are having one-on-one dialogues or giving care that change and ripple affect what happens in these hierarchical settings. It's those moments that make the difference. So it's, how are you going to show up in this moment, in this season? How are you going to show up? What internal work do you need to commit to? My theological work is rooted in practical theology, which, if my professor was watching, would be like, you've trained for this, to explain what practical theology is. But everybody will give you a different response. But for me, practical theology is lived out human interpersonal relationships with various degrees of theology in real time for the sake of human development and care. That's how I view that. And I queer that, right? So the way that I think about it is, how do we commit? So how can you commit in this moment? How can you make space in this moment? How can you be collaborative with the humanity around you in this moment? And then how can you interrogate what you're doing? Interrogate means critique what you're doing. Is it selfish? Is it just for me to look good? Is it actually not intersectional? Have I actually listened to a trans person and their needs? Wow. These are kind of the four, what we call in academic terms, modalities of like, here are the questions I should ask while I'm looking at what I might engage in. And again, they aren't complicated. Can you make a commitment to caring for queer people? Most of us are already saying yes, right? Can you make space for queer folks? Okay, I have a basement in my church, and it's available Wednesday from 5 to 6. I know that the college across the street has a group of folks who might want to have their group here. Let's invite them in. That, okay, you made space. And then you're looking at, all right, how can I be collaborative in that way? How can I invite, the Women's Guild. I'm thinking of my own congregational setting that I'm a member of. How can I invite the Women's Guild to be a part of this ministry of the space that we're offering? Maybe they're knitting scarves right now, and they might want to knit some rainbow or trans-colored scarves, and we can gift it to them. Okay, collaborative humanity, and can share together, listen, and be with each other. And then interrogation, and then critique of that. Okay, is this sound? Have we at like it's just kind of this is a tangible way to think of how to like work through that. But it really is as simple as showing up. If you're asking yourself what can you do, it's showing up. It's preaching about this. It's making sure that you're going through in a fruitful and sound way the open and affirming process, or renewing your open and affirming status, or seeking curriculum and education. It's checking out Gender and Sexuality Justice Ministries resources and what we're doing and what we're contributing. It's asking of us. It's sharing what your needs are, and it's sharing your celebrations too.
Yes.
Small is all. It's not about the big. It's about the small. Small is all. We hear so much about the rhetoric that's happening, and churches who may be having their flags torn down, or certain kinds of threats happening. And we need to hear about that, and we need to talk about that. And we also really need to hear about the joy and the resilience and the progression movement too. Yes. So even sharing that, even amplifying those things. And not treating queer issues as a check mark for 1 month of the year. Just like we don't treat, what our westernized world wants to call as African American Heritage or Black History Month. Like we should be celebrating and being intersectional in the approach of who is in our pulpit, who are in our pews, and who we go to outside of our pews every single day. And the number one thing I tell people is it's overwhelming because there's so much justice we need in the world. Pick one thing. Pick one thing. If that's opening that basement that you have from 4 to 5:30 for those kids at the high school who really need to have that space because stuff is messy in the school, that's your one thing. And then pour into it. Yeah.
Now you see why I love Rachael. That's awesome. And Gender and Sexualities we can find on ucc.org.
Yes. If you type just into the lovely Google or Bing or whatever other search platform, if you just put Gender and Sexuality Justice Ministries or Gender and Sexuality UCC, like any of these abbreviations will get you there. And you can also follow me on Queer and Faith and ask, and I'll send it to you. But please reach out to us, and please continue to be in partnership with Open Affirming Coalition. We can't do this work without each other, and we definitely can't get free without all of you. So
praise the Lord. And you're on at Queer in Faith. That's on Instagram and Twitter.
It's Instagram, Twitter. I have a Facebook, but I don't post to it. Instagram is really my main feed. So if you want to come hang out on IG with me, by all means, come on over.
There we go. Thank you so much, Rachael. So excited that Rachael Ward was here with us to share those pearls of wisdom. And I'm just like excited. And like I said, the goosebumps are still there. So thank you all for checking out the pod. If you are listening to this, you can check out the video on our YouTube page. If you are watching the video, you can listen to the audio on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. So take care. God bless. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you, Rachael.
Yeah. Peace, y'all. Take care.